Secretary Lew, I basically understood your answers to my previous questions, say that you have no intention of seeking reauthorization of the Iran Sanctions Act, an act that in October 3rd of 2013, entitled, in a hearing entitled Reversing Iran's Nuclear Program, Wendy Sherman and David Cohen heralded as critical to moving forward. In 2014, negotiation on Iran's nuclear program, another hearing, they both said the same thing and talked about the important congressional sanctions. So it seems to me that if you want a deterrent, Iran has to know consequences. Maybe it will never be called into play. That's fine. That's good. Hopefully they won't be called into play. But they need to know what the consequences are. And so as far as I'm concerned, I think we should be moving to reauthorize the sanctions that Congress passed and that expire next year, and let the Iranians know that if they violate, those are one of the things they're going to have to go back to. So I'm going to move to reauthorize them because I think it needs to be part of the deterrent. So let me ask Secretary Kerry the following question. Do you believe that Iran will be and should be a regional power?
Do I believe that they should be in the future or something?
Will be and should be a regional power?
Well, I think to some degree there's an element of power in what they're doing right now. So I don't know about the will be, but do I want them to be? Not in the way that they behave today, no.
Right. Well, I'm glad to hear that because, you know, the President in a column with Tom Friedman said that the truth of the matter is that Iran will be and should be a regional power. But that's a pretty bold statement about a country that is the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world as defined by our government. So there would have to be a dramatically different Iran to have any aspiration for that to be a regional power.
I think, Senator.
Let me ask you one final thing. You're an excellent lawyer, and when you can get to argue something both ways, if you can achieve that, that's great. So I've heard you argue we will have everything on the table that we have today. We will have the sanctions. We will have a military option. Then I've also heard you say sanctions is not going to get Iran to stop its nuclear program in terms of, and a military option will only deter them for 3 years. So isn't really what you're saying that at the end of the day, we hope that Iran will change its course over the next 10 to 15 years, that if they violate, we'll get notice from 3 months that we had to 12 months, a year, but at the end of the day, neither sanctions nor a military option is going to, if I listen to you, your arguments, nor a military option is going to ultimately deter Iran if they decide to do so. So doesn't that in essence say to us that we are reconciled at the end of the day if they want to accept Iran as a nuclear weapons?
Absolutely, positively not. Okay. Not in the closest of imagination. I'll tell you why. They're not going to be sanctioned into submission. We've seen that. They have what is called their resistance economy. There are limits to what our friends and allies are able and willing to do. You know the challenge we've had in just bringing people along on Ukraine. Bringing people along, particularly the Russians and the Chinese, over a long period of time is going to be very, very difficult. There's sort of a half-life, if you will, to the capacity to keep the sanctions pressure in place. In addition to that, on the military option, we all know, as it's described to us by the military, it's a 2 to 3 year deal, whatever. Now, that option is, that is real. It's a last resort option. If you can't make diplomacy work, if you can't succeed in putting together a protocol that they have to follow by which they live, which guarantees they won't have a weapon, that's your sort of last resort. But it shouldn't be the first resort. It shouldn't be the place you force yourself to go to. And I think given the structure of this agreement, we have a much better option. Because whenever it is, 15 years, 20 years, whatever the moment is that the alarm bells go off on a civil nuclear program, which has 24/7 access, which has inspectors, which we will know has suddenly moved from 5% to 10% to 20% enrichment, all the alarm bells go off. We will have the ability to bring those nations back together. And the question is, do you have a sort of readiness and willingness of those countries to come together because you've honored a process and worked through a process, or are you, sort of pushing them away?
The point is to come together, what, for the sanctions that you say won't lead them to
No, but
change their
sanctions
course.
obviously brought them to the table. That's a different thing.
Or come together for a military option, which at the end of the day will deter but not end it? I mean, I just don't understand the proposition.
Let me.
Sounds like your proposition will be there whether it is today or whether there's a violation
No,
in
Senator,
the future.
because I believe this deal, in fact, achieves what we need to achieve now. We wouldn't have come to you. We wouldn't have signed this. I assure you, Germany, France, Britain would not have signed this agreement, all of us together on the same day, if we didn't have a sense of confidence that this is doing the things we need to do, shutting off the uranium path, shutting off the plutonium path, shutting off the covert path, and so forth. And we believe it does that. That's why we're here. We believe it does that. Now, the proof will be in the implementation. We all know that. But we have a sufficient cushion here of those years because of the very dramatic steps Iran has agreed to take and to implement. We have a very real cushion during which time we have a chance of building up confidence. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that's absolutely going to work 100%. I believe it will. But if they don't comply, I do have confidence we're going to know there's noncompliance. And then we have the options available to us that we have today.